Hello, my name is Gary Shotton, and I'm here as a part of Inspiring Better Business IBB Talks. And today I want to talk about the word dependency, and especially in relationship to our dependency on God or a substitute for God, like money, security, career. So I would have had three major times. I can just summarize in the brief period we have here of periods of time or decisions I had to show that I could depend upon God in my life. Number one, I had worked 9.5 years for a big oil company. I had a good paying job. I had insurance, a vehicle, and I felt God nudging me to go and give that up and go to Bible school. We loaded up, went to Bible school. It's a long story. I can just summarize, but when I got to my new town, I was expecting a great job because I had credentials, 10 years experience, and there was no job. I had to depend upon God for what was going to happen next. I had a chance to call my parents, and I could have said, Dad, I didn't work out like I planned. I was thinking I'd have a good income. I have a little bit of money, but could you support me for a couple of years? I opted out and didn't do that. I wanted to learn to be dependent upon God. Number two, I was at the end of my Bible school, and I had determined that by making part-time income, I was moving furniture. It was a tough job. It was a physical job. I wasn't afraid of the physical part of it, and so then I had a choice. Shall I go and abandon this idea of owning my business and go back and secure an engineering job where I could go to work for somebody and I could be dependent upon a paycheck? Now, there's nothing wrong with a paycheck, but I just learned how to walking in faith, and I wanted to be dependent upon God, not on my paycheck. Number three, at the end of some 20 years, I was 17 years owning that moving and storage business, and actually 6 years, I decided God was leading me to start and buy an existing company. And I'm thinking, I looked at the numbers, it looks real good. I took a huge risk. I knew I was dependent upon God. I had a little spare cash in each one of these cases. In each one of these cases, I had some cash reserve, but oh my goodness, I owned it for 2 years, and then, or a little over 2 years, and then in 2009, the economy just totally tanked. It totally dropped. I couldn't imagine how quick it could change. No jobs. I had to lay off 41 employees. I was at 65 employees, and I quickly reduced down to 24 employees. And now I had my back against the wall. I'm determined to make it through, and I turned to my dependency upon God. I was made it clear that I'm depending upon Him and the business skills that God had given me through these years. So my point is not to follow me and not to brag about me, but we're always going to have this chance to shift our dependency to something or other. I have noticed that the issue of dependency actually starts when we're children. I can only be brief again here, but as a small child, I was very thankful that my parents, even when I was 14, I was expected to go get a loan at the bank for some cattle. When I was younger than that, when I was 7 and 8, we went a week long to Bible school, where that kind of weaned us off of our parents in a good way, which obviously we didn't leave our parents, but it was just a week away from mom and dad. Later on, after I went, as I say, when I went to Bible school or got married, I was able to separate myself from my parents and not be dependent in a negative way, a good way, but an unhealthy way for my parents to supply for me. Now, the object here is, how do we become dependent upon God? That's the issue. How do we become dependent upon God and trust in Him? This is a fine line, because I'm going to talk about having a cash reserve. I'm not talking about just lowering the reserve to zero, but we have to be honest. No matter what is reserve we have, we're going to have to quickly have some kind of income financially if things work out different than we expect. expected. I could kind of group the listeners into several groups and make some suggestions. Some of you listening may be unemployed, no job, or significantly underemployed. Well, what should you do? How do you shift your dependency upon God when you're in that situation? Obviously, you could have family and children. You could be a single. That could make a little difference. But learn to work for someone else if you can. That's just fine, because if you can get a job, then that's a great opportunity to develop some skills, develop your work habits, your work ethics. And God created work. Never believe that God's just going to send you money from heaven somehow without work. I believe God designed work for us. And so while you're working for someone, though, you might be expected to do something unethical, immoral, or inappropriate in some way. And now's a good time to say, no, that's the line. I'm working for someone else. My dependency is upon God. I'm not going to lower my godly standards and keep this job. You might have to take a difficult stand in this, but I suggest that when you take that stand for God, and you would be either at a dead-end street with your job or asked to do something inappropriate, God will show up. And there's an example of you being dependent upon God in a difficult situation. Let's say you're working and you do have a job. Well, this is a shining example of God in the workplace. Can you be that shining example? Can you not be perfect, but can you demonstrate the goodness of God to your fellow workers? This was part of my life for almost 10 years, 9.5 years. I was working for someone else. And man, that built some character in me, because I had to submit myself and also balance out, would I drink when it was a social drinking, or would I cuss or say bad words or listen to bad jokes when I'm working in the work world. All this comes about. You can control you. You can't control everybody else around you. And you might, when you're in this situation, create some side income, a second job, a side job, or that could create a business, an enterprise, not a job for someone else, and start developing your business skills and move your dependency from that workplace to something that God could bless you with. Well, then, what about ownership? Well, you're going to always heard this over and over again. Start small, grow step by step, become dependent upon God, and be sure that this is a time that you can build some cash reserve at each one of these levels. When you're working for someone, build a little cash reserve. When you're working or all the time, build some cash reserve. I'm going to talk about cash reserve because some people have conveyed to me that maybe I wasn't in faith because I had a cash reserve. Well, I disagree with that. I believe that stages in life and situations in life that you're responsible to make it through the seasons and cycles of business. It's not always the same. If you set your benchmark on your finances when everything's are going really good, what are you going to do when it drops off? So I suggest that you set your expenditures down below the level of income and set some money aside. It's not ungodly to have some reserve, but if I'm trusting in my reserve, which is hard to do because you never are going to be able to, in a logical situation, create such a huge reserve that you never would need to trust God. So have a reserve, have some cash flow, have some extra, create a margin, and that's going to make the day go a lot better for you and your spouse and your family, and that's going to change. If you have a whole bunch of a number of small children, you probably need to be more conservative. You need to have more of a cash reserve. You need to be a little more cautious with these decisions you're making. Be a giver. At all levels. If you want God's involvement in your life, you're going to have to decide. I'm not saying send me money. I'm just saying decide how God would let you give as a portion of your money. The strong suggestion and Word of God talks about a tithe. That's its own subject. I have been a tither of my personal household income for more than 48 years. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying that's part of God's plan for my life. And God has designed us to work. Don't be afraid of work. Don't be afraid of that being a part of God's plan. Well, I just trust that this could be helpful on being dependent upon God is a part of your future, and I believe you'll succeed if you'll do that. Thanks for your time, and thanks for being a part of Inspiring Better Business.